Imagine if I told you that every dollar in your wallet, every credit card swipe, every loan you've ever taken, and even the stock market itself, exists because of one man who was born poor, orphaned as a child, and never even went to college. This man didn't inherit wealth. He didn't have powerful connections, but he built the entire financial foundation of the United States from scratch. And without him, America as we know it today wouldn't exist. Stay with me, because this story will completely change how you see money and power in America. Welcome to the Wealth Chronicles, where we dive deep into the stories of the people who shaped the economy we live in today. Before we get into this incredible story, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button right now, and subscribe to the channel because you're about to discover something they do unteach in most history classes. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end of this video. So who is this mystery man? His name is Alexander Hamilton. Now, you might be thinking you already know about him because of that famous Broadway musical, right? But what you're about to hear goes way beyond any song or stage performance. This is the real story of how one immigrant with nothing but ambition and genius literally invented the American economy. And I mean that literally. The banking system, the stock market, the concept of federal credit, even the Coast Guard, all Hamilton, every single one. Let us start at the very beginning because Hamilton's origin story reads like something out of a movie. He was born in the Caribbean, on a tiny island called Nevis, around 1755 or 1757. Nobody even knows his exact birth year because his family was that poor and unimportant. His father abandoned the family when Hamilton was just a kid. Then, when he was only 13 years old, his mother died from a severe fever. He was completely alone in the world, with no money, no family, and no prospects. But here's where it gets interesting. Even as a teenager working as a clerk in a trading company, Hamilton showed something special. He wasn't just good with numbers. He understood how money moved, how trade worked, and how economies connected across oceans. When a massive hurricane devastated the island in 1772, young Hamilton wrote a letter describing the destruction. That letter was so powerful, so well written that local businessmen were blown away. They pooled their money together and sent this poor orphan boy to America to get an education. Think about that for a second. Imagine writing something so impressive that people you barely know decide to invest in your future. That's the kind of mind Hamilton had. Now, here's where I want you to pause for just 1 second. If you're enjoying this story so far, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're just getting started, and what comes next is going to show you exactly how Hamilton's genius changed everything about money in America. Don't miss it. Hamilton arrived in New York in 1773, right before the American Revolution was about to explode. He enrolled at King's College, which is now Columbia University. But he didn't just study. He got involved in the revolutionary cause, writing powerful pamphlets that argued for American independence. When the war started, he joined the Continental Army. And here's what's crazy. George Washington himself noticed this young immigrant and made him his right-hand man, his most trusted advisor. Hamilton wasn't just taking notes. He was helping Washington make critical military and strategic decisions. By his early 20s, Hamilton had become one of the most important people in the Revolutionary War. But the war revealed something that terrified Hamilton. The American army was broke. Soldiers weren't getting paid. Supplies weren't arriving. The Continental Congress couldn't raise money effectively. The 13 colonies were acting like 13 separate countries, each doing their own thing. And Hamilton realized something that most people didn't understand yet. America could win the war but still lose everything if they couldn't figure out the money problem. This obsession with creating a strong financial system would become Hamilton's life mission. After the war ended in 1783, America was in chaos. The country owed massive debts to soldiers, to foreign nations like France, and to its own citizens, who had loaned money for the war effort. There was no national currency that anyone trusted. Each state printed its own money, and most of it was worthless. Trade between states was a nightmare. Some states even put tariffs on goods from other states, treating each other like foreign countries. The whole system was falling apart. Many people, including some of the founding fathers, wondered if this whole American experiment was going to collapse before it even really began. Then came 1787, and the Constitutional Convention. The founders realized they needed a new government structure. Hamilton was there, pushing hard for a strong central government. He didn't win every argument, but the new Constitution gave the federal government more power than before. And in 1789, when George Washington became the first president, he made a decision that would change American history. He appointed Alexander Hamilton as the very first Secretary of the Treasury. Hamilton was only 32 years old, and he was about to build an entire financial system from nothing. Let me tell you something really important here. What Hamilton did next wasn't just impressive, it was revolutionary. Are you still with me? Because this is where it gets really good. Drop a comment below and let me know if you're re-seeing how this all connects to our economy today. I love hearing from you, and your comments help this channel grow. So Hamilton takes office as Treasury Secretary, and immediately he faces the biggest financial crisis imaginable. The national debt is huge. States are drowning in their own debts. Nobody trusts American credit. Foreign investors think America is about to fail. Most people would panic. But Hamilton, he sees opportunity. He writes a series of reports to Congress that lay out his vision. These aren't just boring government documents. These are blueprints for building a modern economy. First, Hamilton tackles the debt problem. And here's his genius move. Instead of trying to avoid paying the debts, he does the opposite. He insists that the federal government must pay every single debt in full, including the debts that individual states owed. People thought he was crazy. Why should the federal government take on all that debt? But Hamilton understood something profound about how credit works. If America paid its debts in full, investors would trust American credit in the future. That trust would allow America to borrow money when it needed to, at good interest rates. It was like building a credit score for an entire country. But here's where the controversy started. Many of the original debt holders, like soldiers and farmers, had sold their bonds to speculators for pennies on the dollar because they needed cash and didn't think they'd ever get paid. Now Hamilton was saying the government would pay these speculators the full value. Critics, especially Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, were furious. They said this was unfair, that it rewarded rich speculators instead of the people who actually sacrificed for the Revolution. The debate was intense, but Hamilton argued that the principle mattered more than who currently held the bonds. If America didn't honor its financial obligations completely, nobody would ever trust American credit again. Hamilton won that fight, but he had to make a deal. Jefferson and Madison wanted the nation's capital to be in the South. Hamilton wanted his financial plan passed, so they made the famous Compromise of 1790. The capital would be moved to a new city on the Potomac River, which would become Washington, D.C. In exchange, Hamilton's debt plan would pass. This is actually the famous dinner table bargain that everyone talks about. Politics and finance, mixed together, creating the future. Now, make sure you're keeping up, because what Hamilton does next is even more important. If you're finding this valuable, smash that like button. It really helps us create more content like this on the Wealth Chronicles. Hamilton's second big move was creating the first Bank of the United States in 1791. And this was huge. This wasn't just a place to store money. This was a central bank that could issue a stable national currency, make loans to the government and businesses, and manage the nation's finances. Before this, America had a confusing mess of different currencies and no central financial institution. The Bank of the United States changed everything. Suddenly, American businesses could get reliable loans. The government could manage its finances professionally. Trade became easier because everyone was using the same trusted currency. But again, controversy erupted. Jefferson and his followers argued that the Constitution didn't explicitly give the government the power to create a national bank. They believed in a strict interpretation of the Constitution. If something wasn't specifically written in the Constitution, the government couldn't do it. Hamilton disagreed completely. He argued for a broader interpretation. The Constitution gave Congress the power to regulate commerce and manage finances. Creating a bank was a necessary and proper way to exercise those powers. This debate between strict and loose interpretation of the Constitution continues to this day in American politics. And it all started with Hamilton's bank. President Washington sided with Hamilton, and the bank was created. It was an immediate success. American credit improved dramatically. Businesses flourished. International investors started trusting America. The economy began to grow. Hamilton had proven his vision was right. Hamilton's third major accomplishment was creating the American manufacturing sector. He wrote the Report on Manufactures in 1791, arguing that America couldn't just be a farming nation. To be truly powerful and independent, America needed factories, industries, and manufacturing. This put him in direct conflict with Jefferson again, who envisioned America as a nation of independent farmers. But Hamilton saw the future. He understood that industrial power would determine which nations became global leaders. He proposed tariffs to protect young American industries from foreign competition, government subsidies to help industries get started, and infrastructure improvements like roads and canals to help commerce flow. Not all of Hamilton's manufacturing ideas were implemented immediately. Some took decades. But his vision was absolutely correct. America did become an industrial powerhouse, and that industrial strength made America a superpower. Hamilton saw that future when most people couldn't. Now, let's talk about something you might not know. Hamilton also established the U.S. Mint, the Coast Guard, and the system for collecting taxes. He created the framework for how the federal government would function financially. Every procedure, every system, every form, Hamilton had to invent from scratch. There was no template. No other country had done exactly what America was trying to do. Hamilton was writing the playbook as he went. Here's something I want you to think about. Every time you use a dollar bill, every time you trust that your bank is safe, every time the government borrows money to build roads or respond to a crisis, you're seeing Hamilton's system in action. Are you starting to see how important this man was? Let me know in the comments what surprises you most about Hamilton's story. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We've got so many more incredible stories coming your way. But Hamilton's story isn't all triumph. He made enemies, powerful ones. Thomas Jefferson hated his vision for America. They represented two completely opposite ideas about what America should be. Jefferson wanted small government, farming communities, and states' rights. Hamilton wanted strong central government, industrial growth, and national unity. These two philosophies clashed constantly, and their rivalry created America's first political parties. Hamilton's supporters became the Federalists. Jefferson's supporters became the Democratic Republicans. American politics was born from this conflict. Hamilton also made personal mistakes that damaged his reputation. He had an affair with a woman named Maria Reynolds. And when political enemies tried to accuse him of financial corruption related to her husband, Hamilton did something shocking. He published a pamphlet admitting the affair in detail to prove there was no financial wrongdoing. He sacrificed his personal reputation to protect his professional integrity. It was a scandal that embarrassed him and his wife Eliza deeply. In today's world, we'd say he got cancelled. But even with this scandal, Hamilton kept fighting for his economic vision. The ultimate tragedy came in 1804. Hamilton had a bitter rivalry with Aaron Burr, who had been vice president under Thomas Jefferson. Their political and personal conflicts escalated for years. Finally, Burr challenged Hamilton to a duel. Dueling was common back then, a way for gentlemen to defend their honor. Hamilton didn't want to fight. His own son had died in a duel 3 years earlier, and the tragedy haunted him. But he felt he couldn't refuse without losing all respect. On July 11, 1804, Hamilton and Burr met in Weehawken, New Jersey. Shots were fired. Hamilton was hit. He died the next day, July 12, at only 47 or 49 years old, depending on which birth year is correct. Think about that. The man who built the entire American financial system, who created the framework for the economy we still use today, died in a duel before he turned 50. What else could he have accomplished if he had lived longer? What other innovations might he have created? We'll never know. But what he did accomplish in his short life changed the world forever. So why does Hamilton matter today? Why should you care about someone who died over 200 years ago? Here's why. The systems Hamilton created are still running. The stock market on Wall Street, which emerged partly because of Hamilton's financial policies, is still the center of global finance. The idea that government debt isn't necessarily bad if it's managed wisely, that's still debated today. The Federal Reserve, created much later, in 1913, is based on principles Hamilton advocated. Even the debates we have today, about big government versus small government, about federal power versus states' rights, those arguments started with Hamilton versus Jefferson. When America faces a financial crisis like in 2008, or during the COVID pandemic in 2020, the government's ability to borrow money to stabilize banks, to manage the economy, all of that traces back to the foundation Hamilton built. When your credit score matters, when you can get a mortgage or a business loan, when the dollar is trusted around the world as a stable currency, you're benefiting from Hamilton's vision. He didn't just shape the U.S. economy, he created it. Here's what I find most inspiring about Hamilton's story. He started with nothing. He was an orphan, an immigrant, with no money and no connections. But he had vision, intelligence, and an incredible work ethic. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't let his circumstances define him. He saw what needed to be done, and he did it. And because of his work, millions of people have had opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. That's real legacy. That's real impact. Before we wrap up, I want to hear from you. What part of Hamilton's story resonated with you the most? Was it his rise from poverty? His genius in creating financial systems? His tragic end? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And here's the important part. If this video taught you something new, if you see the American economy differently now, do me a favor. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it. Share it with a friend who loves history, or someone interested in economics. or just someone who enjoys a great success story. The more people who understand these stories, the better we all understand the world we live in. And listen, if you've made it this far in the video, you're exactly the kind of viewer the Wealth Chronicles is made for. Someone who's curious, who wants to understand the deeper stories behind money and power. We've got so many more incredible stories coming up. Stories about the people, the decisions, and the moments that shaped the economy. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Alexander Hamilton's life teaches us that one person really can change the world. He didn't have advantages. He didn't have an easy path. But he had a vision for what could be, and he had the courage and intelligence to make it real. Every dollar you earn, every transaction you make, every economic opportunity you have exists, in part, because an orphan immigrant decided to dream big and work hard. That's the power of vision. That's the power of determination. That's the legacy of Alexander Hamilton, the man who truly shaped the U.S. economy. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Wealth Chronicles. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep discovering the stories that shape our world.